Hi, everyone. Welcome to another typology interview. We have Michael. How's it going, man?
Hey, good. Glad to be here. Hi.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah.
So you're actually the same twin type as Dave Powers.
Yes. The
So,
same exact type. Yeah.
right, yeah. Um, do you identify with your type at all?
Yeah, I do. I do. And if you want to start at the beginning, like when I first kind of
Yeah.
started getting into ops and all that stuff.
Well, do you want to tell
So
me about how you got into typology? Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So it's funny. There was this girl that I was talking to. It would have been like early 2019, and she sent me the 16personalities.com, that website. She sent
Right.
me the link to take the quiz, and I actually, it was funny. I watched your interview with Dave and how he was saying that he got INTJ when he took the official MBTI test. I actually got INTJ too when I took the 16 personalities test.
Right.
And
Yeah, it's a different test, but yeah.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
different, but they still use the same like
Yeah.
identifiers. Yeah, but anyways, it is different than MBTI. Um, but I
Cool.
got INTJ on that, and then I was like reading through the profile, and it was like looking back on it because I didn't even know what I didn't know what NI was. I didn't know what any of the functions were, any of that back then. But it was like looking back on it, I could see like it felt like they kind of understood NI, or like they were like nailing what I felt like NI was. But then they talk about like the feeling stuff, and I was like, this doesn't sound right. Like they'd talk about how, you know, the INTJs are afraid to get into relationships and afraid of like expressing their emotions and stuff. And it was like none of that really like clicked with me. I was like, that doesn't really sound right. And so then I was watching like a Frank James video or something, trying to understand the whole like functions better. And then he recommended the Dave's channel, and then I found it
Oh,
through
cool.
there. And then that was how that happened. And then when I found out about jumpers, I was like, oh, that's what I've been seeing. It's like, yes, I have the lead NI, but I don't have the savior T. It's because I have the savior F. So that was like where the disconnect for me was in the more standard traditional MBTI and
Yeah.
INTJ. Yeah.
So what did you type yourself as then when you were
When I
first doing
first
it?
started,
Yeah.
so when I first like after like a month or so, and I really felt like because I immediately was like, okay, NIFI, that's me. Like I got that pretty much right off the bat. Um, and then I was watching. I joined the class somewhat like maybe a couple months after I found their YouTube channel, and I was watching the classes. I started with a lot of the INTJ classes. One of the first ones I watched was Steve Jobs, and I was like, I actually thought that might be my type. Which Steve Jobs is double masculine, NIFI, sleep, blast, consume, play. And then the first thing I scratched off from that was double masculine. I'm like, okay, no. Like watching more of the double masculines, I'm like, that is definitely not correct. So then that's when I changed it to audio, which is what I actually am. And
Right.
then but the animals were like the hardest thing for me to process through, because I was like, for the longest time I thought I was either sleep, blast, consume, play, or sleep, consume, blast, play, like one of those two,
Right.
because I
You didn't see
felt
consume last.
right, like with with the play last, yeah, because I have consume last, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you didn't see the consume last.
Right, I didn't see that at all, exactly. and
Yeah.
and that was for like a while until I actually talked to Dave or Shan. I talked to her on the phone, and they had me send in like a 20-minute video. So I didn't do the official video typing, but
Yeah.
they had me send in like a 20-minute video rather than the full hour to
Right.
get a feel for it. And they were like, okay, we're watching this. They both watched it, and they were like, you're right on audio, you're right on NIFI. And then I think it was really funny because I remember the way that Shan worded it, because she sent me a little audio back, and she's like, here's what I would look at. And I was like, oh no, here it's coming. and and then she's like, okay, so you're not blast last. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And you're also energy dominant. And then she's like, do the math. And I was like thinking in my head, and she's like, I think you're the same type as Dave. I was like,
Right.
oh, consume last. That's so weird. And so that one is I'm still processing it a little bit. Like I get it now. Like it very much like makes sense now that I've like lived with it for, it was probably like 9 months ago or so that I talked to them the first time. So I've like been working through it and like looking at it and seeing it everywhere more so, because like being, SE masculine last, like that I totally get. Being the audio, that totally all made sense to me. It was just that animal order that was weird that I had to like work through and process.
Right.
I did not see myself as consume last, which of course, how would you?
So are you starting to see it now? How
Yeah,
would you? Yeah. So how would you define? How would you see it? Yeah.
it's because I think my mom is also consume last, which is really funny because I would always get on her for doing like consume last things. Like she wouldn't read the book, because I've read like 6 books in my life that are nonfiction. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely have consume. But like I'd be reading like David Allen's book. I read that one. That's one of the few things that I've actually consumed. And she was like, I was telling her that she should read it because I think there's a lot of good stuff in the book, blah, 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 organized, control, and chaos, etc. And she's like, no, just tell me the important parts. And I was getting on her. I'm like, no, you have to read the book. It's important to read the book. And then I realized that I'm doing the same thing constantly of like just bothering people. Like, you tell me the answer, you give me the answer. I'm not going to just like with the election stuff, not to get political or anything, but like I have a friend who I think is like an ESFP with Consume First. And I was just bothering him for election updates instead of just Googling it myself. I'm like, how does the recount work in this state? How does this work in this state? Instead of just like looking it up for myself, I'm just texting my friend and bothering him the whole time about like the missing information. Cause we're both, observer freaks, but,
right.
But yeah.
When you do consume, does it feel like even you're not consuming right or something?
Sometimes. Yeah. Like one thing that I've seen them talk about with the consume last is that they're like sometimes trying to consume what they already know. And I definitely see that happening. Like one thing that made it start to click for me was when they talked about how the consume last have the hardest time updating their worldview, updating their thought processes and all that. Because that was when it really started to make sense to me. It was like, yeah, I'm never looking to update, I'm never looking to like revamp the way that I think or the way that I do things. And that was like kind of an aha moment of like, oh, that's what it is. Cause like I'll look things up, I'll look up other like I watched, the classes and stuff, but it's like it's because the op stuff has already made it into my box, It's like, yes, I'm doing the consume. Yes, I watch the classes. Yes, I watch the Q&As. Yes, I'm watching things to learn. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but that's already stuff that, not that I already know. I don't want to say that, but it's like, it's stuff that's already made it in. It's not like I'm looking for new things. So that's where the consume last is weird.
You're confirming your worldview.
Right. Exactly. That's what it feels like a lot of the time.
You're digging your heels in deeper at the end, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you see NI similarly to Dave in terms of planning all the time? Like that's kind of what you're doing? Yeah.
An absurd amount. There was an example that happened a couple of days ago that I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Oh, okay. So I was in my car. I had just gotten back home and I was blasting the AC because it was kind of warm that day. But we've been having like somewhat warm days, like, 70, 80 degrees. And then it's been cooler in the morning. And so what I did was I parked my car and I was like, okay, well, it might be cold the next time I get in my car. So I'm going to preemptively turn down the AC in my car so that when I get back in my car, I don't get blasted with cold air immediately. And it was like, and I like caught myself doing it at the time. I was like, what are you doing? You're so weird. You're like planning to not get blasted by cool air for 1 second, like a day from now. And,
I mean, I guess I do the same thing. It's
yeah. But, anyway, that was just like one specific time that I can think of recently. But yeah, as far as like the planning, it is an extreme amount of planning. And it's also like, I was watching their class on Jay-Z, who's also NiFi, but he's double masculine, sleep, consume, blast, play. And they're kind of talking about how like the feminine Ni is like the time based function, like how it's the one that's always looking at time and looking at like the future and the possibilities more so than just like masculine Ni, which is kind of more of a straightforward type function. And that was something that I've really been thinking about ever since, because it's true. Because it's like, in addition to just being like planning, which I think it's true, but it's also, I think, not the extent of what Ni does. Like it's not of the full extent. Yeah. It's thinking about like possibilities, which makes it kind of sound any, but it's like, it's more, I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't just sound, that is like easy for other people to follow. Cause it's very much like, cause it's an introverted function. It's just very much in my head. But like one thing that I'll do is I'll think about like branching timelines, like if this happens and then this happens and then this happens and this happens, then it'll end up here. And then if like I think about like if one event were to be changed in like either my life or in the world or whatever, it's like what would be the differences that would sprout because of that, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what my brain is kind of compulsively doing a lot of, is like, okay, if this happens, then how are things going to be different? And see, I can't come up with any sensor examples.
Yeah.
But that's what it's doing a lot of the time, I feel like, is just looking at possibilities and, of course, the future. You know, that's kind of a given.
Right. What about in terms of FI? Do you see it as priorities? Do you see it as your yeah?
So yeah, that what was interesting was like, because like I was watching, like I said, I was watching your interview with Dave, and it was so weird and uncanny how like some of the things that he was saying lined up exactly with my experience. Like even though I kind of knew that, like once I discovered the jumpers, I was like, okay, that's what I am. It still took me a little while to come to grips with not being a thinker, like with not being thinking dominant. Like yes, I think mathematically, you know, I have the strongest like demon thinking function that you could have, because it's the one being jumped over and it's double activated or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's also extroverted.
Right, and it's extroverted. Yeah. So like I don't want to say it's like a third savior, but it's like it's definitely feminine. Like it's very, I can access it pretty easily.
Right.
But then it's like really when you look at the human needs, it's like that's where it becomes super apparent that like I'm definitely self above tribe, and it is like the values based thing. Like I'll give you an example. Is like when I was in high school, this was like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that, and I was just sick of it. Like I was entering my senior year, and I had like 2 classes left that I had to take, but they were going to make me go for a full day. So like, even though I only had 2 credits left that I needed for the entire, like basically to get my degree or my diploma, sorry, they were going to make me go for like a full day, 8 hours a day, you know, like an actual school day. And I was like, you know what? This is dumb. I'm not being valued in this. Like I literally used the phrase, this is way before I knew about ops stuff. I think this is before they went public with ops, but this is way before I knew any of this stuff. And it was like, I don't feel like I'm being valued in this system. And I feel like going to this last year of high school is not going to be valuable for me. And so basically what I did was they had this program where you could go through and get your classes done in a few weeks. And so I did that instead. And like, I missed my whole senior year of high school, you know, willingly, because which is like, again, I don't really care about the whole, like the partying and the prom and like all that. None of that stuff really appeals to me. But it was still very much like, you know, kind of going against the grain of like, okay, not that many people would feel extremely enough about the situation to have like gone to the lengths I did to avoid it, and to avoid feeling like my time was being wasted, you know. And that's kind of the both of my saviors working in tandem, is like it's the time function of like with the NI of like, okay, I see where this is going to go, and then also
that happens a lot with energy DOMs that they've
that as well.
Yeah. And then also like trying to avoid consume, I guess. In some way.
Well, it's funny because like when I was younger, I didn't mind school at all. I liked it because it was like it was so easy. Like especially in like elementary school and middle school, there was not a whole lot being demanded of me at that time, and so I didn't have to really read anything. I didn't have to do much of anything. And I could just kind of like bullshit my way through the classes and get a passing grade, and it wasn't a big deal. And then in high school, a little bit more. I still did the same thing, of course. Like, I actually read half of the history. I got through like half the history book one year, and I was like telling everyone, I was like so proud of myself. And it's like, dude, you didn't even finish it. Like, what are you doing? Because we were supposed to read a chapter every week, and I got through that for like half the year, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. And so and that it became a thing of like, yeah, I don't want to do this consume for sure. And like, I could still have probably gotten through my last year and like been fine. But yeah, it was a lot of like, if I don't care about something, it's like, I definitely don't want to consume it, you know, because with it being so low and such a like deep pull for me to like actually learn something new, if I don't, if I see the value of it long term, it's like I don't want to even touch it, like I don't want to read a book that I'm going to forget in a week or whatever. I don't want to, I just don't want to.
You don't want to waste your time.
I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my energy, because it does feel like, even though our type is pretty extroverted, we still have the sleep first and being energy dominant. It's like, okay, if I'm gonna actually, you're gonna make me come out of my cave and expend energy, I want it to be worth something. I want it to mean something.
Yeah. Well, so I don't get the energy of your sleep. So do you see yourself as having sleep first? Yeah,
I do that part,
because you don't see him sleep first.
Yeah, I know. When you talk to me right now, you're definitely not going to see it. And
that's right, exactly.
And that was something that that was also not sleep first, but being like just the overall extroverted versus introverted charge was difficult to come to grips with, because what's funny is that like the people that I know, like the people in my family, like girlfriends that I've had, my friends, I would actually say that most of them see me as being relatively introverted, which is funny. I've actually talked to them about this. I bothered them, banged on their heads, because it was kind of difficult to like, for me, all the weirdness of like processing my type has come from the animal stack. Like that's been all of it. Like NiFi and audio, like I said at the beginning, that part was pretty easy for me to like write off and be like, okay, that all makes sense. But the animal stack has been the difficult part for me to
identify with that too.
And it makes sense, because I thought that I might literally be on the sleep, consume, blast, play side of the spectrum, which now that I look back on that, is kind of laughable. But I know that the reason why I felt that way was that it is the sleep first, and being kind of energy dominant is like I have the high sleep, and I'm also pretty acutely aware of it, because I have the play sort of balancing it out. And so when I'm in a sleep, sorry, what was that?
Yeah. So how do you see the sleep then?
I see it as like one thing that they talked about is how the animals tend to go in order. And so like the sleep for me, what really sealed it for me, because of course they said that like everybody types themselves as lead sleep. And they also said that everyone types themselves as lead NI. So like when I was finding their stuff, I'm like, okay, am I just delusional? Like, am I actually just an ENFP? Like, am I seeing this wrong?
Right.
But I actually am, lead NI and lead sleep. And for me, it's like, when are you charging up? Is it like, are you doing everything and then recharging afterwards, which is the play above sleep, which I think is like, the more I think about it, that's kind of the smart way to do it, is you like do the things first and then you recharge, and then you do the things again and then you recharge? Or are you like recharging in preparation, or are you like charging up in preparation to do the thing? You know what I mean? Like to me, that's what I see the difference as. And so
so right now when we're seeing your play and your blast, it's because you were doing all of the sleep before the interview.
Right. Exactly. Right. And like I haven't, I did like 2 or 3 chores earlier, and that's like all I've done today, because I was like, oh yeah, I've got the interview today. So like, I don't want to go and do a bunch of things and like waste my energy. Again, energy dominant. I don't want to go and expend all the energy before I go and do this thing, which is like, probably like the main thing that I have planned for today, And so, you're not like right now, you're not going to see much introverted energy for sure. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So like all you really see it as is preserving energy. Like what about the NiFi together, the processing part, the information part of the animal?
Sure. So as far as that goes, it's a lot of processing, but it's also not like the processing gets weird for me, being like blast and play. Like for an example, it's like when I'm in my car, that's when I tend to do like the most deep thinking. For whatever reason, I think it's just because it's such an enclosed space. Like even when I'm like in my room, it's like there are other people here. Like I can't really. It's so weird. Like I can feel the presence of like other people being here, even though they're like I have the door closed and they're not actually around. It's just like the lack of like actual isolation. It's harder for me to do that. But like when I'm in my car, it's like, I'm doing the sleep, but it's kind of weird, because I'm like also sort of like doing blast. Like I'll talk to myself in my car a lot, like trying to process things, trying to work through things, trying to process like ideas and concepts. And yeah, and it's just like the sleep, because it's first, sometimes it's pretty unconscious. Like a lot of the time it's pretty unconscious, and it's like, you know, you think that it's just what everyone else is doing. Like if you're like if you're an IJ, you think that everyone else is constantly planning and like preparing, and they're not, you know, you're just a weird IJ who's always getting ready, you know. And if you're like a double observer, single decider, you're like processing people, and like you think that's what everyone else is doing, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not necessarily what everyone else is doing. And so with the sleep, it's like I'm constantly preserving for myself and being like, okay, I have to preserve my energy. I have to like plan ahead. I have to, you know, do the NiFi dance of like, okay, what matters to me, and what has like a high priority level, and constantly prioritizing. And you think everyone else is doing that because it's at the top, like, you know, it's your first animal, first function, and they're not, you know. And so sometimes it's hard to see, like, it's like they talk about, it's like you can only see yourself in relation to other people.
Is it like you're trying to figure out where the best place to put your energy is, where the most effective, optimal place to put your energy is?
Yeah, that's a lot of it. Yeah. And it's like, and the thing that's funny is like, I think this is like energy dominance in general, but also I think it's very specific to my type, is just the rage when you feel like your time is being wasted by a thing or by a person or by whatever.
A printer that's not working.
Right, exactly. Oh my God. That's so funny. One of the guys I work with, I think he's also an ISTP, and thank God, because we need we work in production for like podcasts and stuff, so it's a lot of tech stuff. So I mean, thank God we have someone who can actually figure those things out. But it's so funny, like, because I work with my dad, and I think he's like an EP some type, and so we're both, you know, single observer idiots. And like when things break, it's like, thank God that he's there to like just calmly assess the situation and get things fixed. And yeah, just a side note on that. Sorry, I distracted myself. What were we talking about?
No, that's good. I'm wondering about typing shortcuts and things like that. Like, do you the anecdotes and stuff, is it tempting to use those to shortcut typing?
Oh yeah, it is for sure. And like, the fact of the matter is that like I am not an expert on like typology at all, and like because I'm like forcing myself to admit that, and forcing myself to respect like that I haven't done the work of like sitting down and like getting a partner and like actually doing the cross check. So like I will be the first to admit that when I'm like typing the people around me, like I still don't really know what type my brothers are. I have like I have guesses, basically, is all I'm willing to like admit to, because it is easy to just abuse the anecdotes and be like, oh, they do this and this and this. And it's like, I could probably build a decent case for typing people, but at the same time, I'm just like, you haven't earned the right to like present these types that you think are correct as fact. You know what I mean?
Do you identify with that, with making a lot of guesses?
Right. Well, oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'm guessing all the time. Like there's a lady that we had in our studio, and she was trying to pronounce a name, and it was like a Nigerian name or something. And I was like, I don't know, I think it's pronounced like this. And she was just like, oh, do you know anything about this language? I think it was like Swahili or something. I don't remember. I was like, no, I'm just throwing out a guess.
Right.
And I was like, that was a moment, that was kind of a crystallization moment of like, you're kind of a bullshitter. Like, you don't know anything about this language. You don't know how to pronounce anything in it. What are you doing?
Right.
But yeah. And then that was just, yeah.
So the single observing, I know you kind of identify with the double deciding. Do you see that? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I don't get freaked out about people, and I never really have. I just kind of like operate under the assumption that the people stuff will work itself out, and if it doesn't, oh well, it wasn't meant to be, you know.
Do you see the tribe's perspective of you?
Sometimes, yeah. Like there have been times where like I've gone pretty all in on the FI, especially because I'm, a bit younger. Like I think I don't remember if you asked me this before we started or not, but I'm
Before we
21.
started, yeah, you said you were
Yeah.
21. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I'm still at the like, as Dave and Shan would put it, the shithead part of your life where you don't really know
Right.
what you're doing. And I can see that. And like, there have been times where I've gone like all in on FI, and so it's like, it's not that like I am amazing at the double deciding yet. Like there are still times where I'm like, I hate this person. I don't want to like ever talk to this person again. They're making all these demands of me. I don't get them away from me. And that happens. But then like, it's like, how long am I mad for? And how long am I processing it for? Not that long, super often. Like there was this guy that we were playing games online. He was a friend of some of my friends, and I really didn't like the way that he was acting, and I kind of blew up on him, and then left. And then I was thinking about it, and I was mad for like an hour. And then afterwards, I was like, I probably shouldn't have blown up on him. That wasn't very cool. And then that was it. Like that was the extent of me like processing this big, somewhat public freak out. It was like me and like 6 or 7 other people, and I kind of like blew up on this guy. And then
that was like a cat energy thing.
What's up? Oh yeah, for sure. And it was also like he had like, and then I took it further. He had like screwed up the NF of like the game lobby. Like we were all like kind of like poking fun at each other. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that. And then he like was actually mad at me, and I didn't know this person. And so I just like blew up on him for like screwing up the vibe of the evening, and like, like, you're screwing this up forever. And I just yelled at him basically. And then of course I made it worse and then left. So yeah, it was a cat energy thing of like, I can take a good amount of, I don't want to say abuse, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
the back and forth, even if it's not entirely friendly, but then once you you push me over, and then you're gonna.
Would it be safe to say that you feel responsible for your own vibe?
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't, because it's like the whole hippie thing. I didn't really like get it at first what it meant, because I don't consider myself to be like super hippie type of person, but yeah, like maintaining the vibe to me, I do see that as being pretty important. And it's funny because like on social media and stuff, you see people constantly saying the word vibes, like summer vibes, midnight vibes, like, just like constantly using the word vibes. And I thought it was stupid, and I thought it was a stupid word. And I was like, can you guys just stop? Like, this is just annoying. But then like, I kind of have realized that it's like, that is really what it is it's like, it's very, because like you think about, like, it helps for me to think about it in terms of what the opposite is. The opposite of NF is ST, which is like, is it real and does it work? And like, is it measurable? Like, to me, those are all ST things. And so you go, what's the opposite of that? And would be something that's not measurable, something that can't necessarily be quantified, something that exists in this very abstract realm, this abstract world. And it's like, yeah, that's what NF is. It's like the whole, collective conscience, or whatever you want to call it, of like just getting the intangibles of like a social situation, or even like your own brain, just getting the intangibles right,
Yeah. I get that it's like impossible to describe.
Yeah, it is in a way. Yeah.
And I mean, like, I guess you can try to describe it with metaphors and analogies, and that's the whole reason why you get those coming out of NFs.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there a good metaphor to describe what happens
with NF, or
with your NF in particular?
Well, it's funny because like my NF being double introverted is weird. Like, if it was like, NIFE, I think that's actually easier to describe, because or even like any FE, because you're getting an extroverted thing to like hook your definition into. But with the double like introvert, especially with the decider, I think being introverted, I think it makes it hard to like explain exactly what it's doing. Cause it's like, you know, like they talk about when David and Shannon are trying to understand the FEs, for example, they like talk about how they have to like combine their FI and their TE and then like project that into someone else. And it's like, and it's weird and it takes
Even
too
then
long.
it's still not FE.
And it's not quite right. And it's, you know, it's just this whole thing. And it's kind of, that's how I see it, is like, okay, you know, like I was reading this book, one of the only books I've ever read in my adult life. It's the book Story by Robert McKee. And he was talking about like writing characters. And he said, like, I have no idea what type he is, but like just looking at him, I want to make him some like double masculine EJ with like TE at the top. That's just what my brain wants to do to him. I have no idea if that's correct. I have literally no idea what his type is. Disclaimer, but that's just what my brain wants to do to him. And he was describing writing characters as like, what's the correct question to ask yourself when you're trying to get inside a character's mind? And the answer that he gave to me was very FI, which kind of like supported my theory of like, you have to like say, I don't remember exactly what he said, and I'm going to get it wrong, and then whatever.
Just wing it, yeah.
Yeah. But it was basically like, if I was this character in this situation, what would I do? Whereas I think the FEs would think that that's just a weird way to look at it. They'd just be like, no, you just know what they're, you know, feeling. Like you just can instantly put yourself in there and be like, they're feeling this. And that's kind of like how it feels. Is like, because like it goes a step further than just like, okay, because like, you know, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's like, that doesn't really go far enough, you know? It's like, because I don't care if somebody makes fun of me for like being stupid or whatever. Like that doesn't really bother me. But there are people that would be bothered by that, you know? And so like that was happening last night. I was playing games with some people, and one of them was like giving this guy a hard time. And I don't know him super well, but I could kind of tell that he's like insecure about his intelligence or whatever. And this guy was calling him stupid for like a play that he'd made. And I was like, not really doing FE of like, I know that he's going to feel this way about this, but I was like able to like pinpoint that the vibe was going south, because this guy, I don't know what type either of them are, but like this one guy was like kind of harassing him a little bit for the way that he was playing. And then this guy was really not happy about it. And like, but we were all kind of joking around at the same time. So it was hard for this other guy to just see that it was like steadily declining and going south as like, of like the vibe in the room. And I was like putting myself in the other guy's shoes of like, okay, I kind of know that this is like a trigger point for him. So I'm going to try to step in and get something done. And we kind of repaired it. And it was fine, but it was just very much like, it's just a weird way
sounds
to
like a
do
blast
not
void.
FE.
Yeah, it sounds like a blast void. You had to step in and blast a little bit, control the tribe.
Yeah, for sure. And I have no problem doing that.
Yeah. Do you see that happen? Like, do you feel that urge every so often to just step in and tell people what to do?
Oh my God, it's so bad. It's really bad. Even like, again, because it's like, you know, you can take whatever sensory points you want and like connect them and make a case for whatever type you want. So like, of course, just grabbing random sensory examples doesn't actually prove anything, but it's like, even like when I look back to me as like a child, and they're like, you know, when there's like a party and all the adults bring their kids. And so all these random kids are kind of together, while the adults are drinking or doing whatever they're doing. And you got like this random assortment of like 8 kids, and nobody really knows what to do or anything. There was a lot of that. And I would always be the one trying to like get everyone to like get on the same page and play the same game, or like, here's an activity that we can all do, but it only works if everyone does it. So if you guys don't join me in this, then you're the assholes, not me.
Right.
And even in like group projects.
Do you get pushback when you do that? Or
well, it's not even that it's pushback. It's just that like people are like, dude, relax, you know, like we're just hanging out. Like, just funny, because like when the blast would like become dominant, you can lose track of like the NF vibe. Like, even if you're lead NF like me, it's like when the blast gets overactive, it's very much like, especially if it's like, it's the NT blast, you know, the NITE blast. It's like you do lose track of the vibe a little bit, because you're over controlling, especially because it's, you know, the blast is not being counterbalanced with any consume, you know?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
just like
It's double
very
activated.
overact. Right,
Yeah.
right. Double activated, yeah. And it just becomes very like overpowering and very like everyone needs to listen to me right now type of thing. And
Yeah.
they talked about that in one of the videos where it was like the lines that people would use based on like what their animals were. Like I think consume was like they're not letting me or something like that. Like, you know, the lines that the consumes will always run to or whatever. And the line for blast was nobody is listening to me. And like Kanye West, you know, as an example of like someone who wants to be listened to constantly, and most people are not listening to him, and he's, you know, he gets upset about that. And that's very much like a, yeah,
Cool.
that's kind of how it goes.
So we have a question. They want you to describe what a concept is. Do you have a
What a
blast on that?
concept is. Oh,
Yeah.
just any concept. Okay. So am I okay? Not to get in the weeds. Am I describing like what I think of the concept of concepts, or am I just describing a specific concept? I think it's the first one, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's just what is a concept in general?
So for me, I think of concepts like I think of this idea of like I call them thought models in my brain of stuff of like this is how I'm going to frame this specific idea or this specific thought that I've had, and I'm going to frame it in a specific way that gives it some sort of like definition, some sort of barriers, some sort of form, so that it exists in a way that I can then like perhaps share with other people, that I can maybe blast play with other people. And that's kind of how I think about it, because it's a somewhat more extroverted way of thinking about it, I think, because it is like in preparation to share it, you know what I mean, versus just like a sleep consume. Like I think of sleep consume.
I think
about
it the same way, but it's the same thing. It's just to use it, you know?
Right, exactly.
Rather than to share it, I want to create it so that I can use it.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, because like the way that I think in like I said, I think in my car a lot is like I'll be just talking to myself and just kind of like blasting through like ideas that like it's funny because it's like I think they like ideas like swim around in my head for maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks. They're just kind of in there and they don't really have any form. And then I'll just be alone in my car, kind of like talking myself through it like a weirdo, and they'll start to take shape the more that I like say them out loud. And that's kind of where it starts. It goes from like being very formless and very just in my head to becoming like, as I start to like try to think of ways that I could communicate this to other people, it becomes much more concrete and becomes more of a thing that I can use. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I got the same thing as well with my NI, where it's like it's my purpose is not to communicate it, so I don't care about putting it in a concrete way until I actually solve it, until I'm done doing whatever NI is doing. Yeah.
You're blessed third, right?
That's what I've been put. Yeah. No idea.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I'm still working on my animals too. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Really cool. So how do you see Demon SE then? What does that mean?
Demon SE it's funny because it's masculine, you know, so like, and I think that like that has been a big struggle throughout my life, is like, because it does kind of result in like the Hulk syndrome, especially with like my two, I know that FI is still a savior, but it's still like the lower ended, like paired with the SE, like, so it's very much like a very angry energy when you get down to the bottom of the stack, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because you're answering in theory here. Like you're you're theorizing to answer. It's like
it's bad, dude. You can't you can't see it. Like,
well, this is what the theory says, so therefore here's my answer.
Yeah.
But like, how do you actually see SE as a demon?
So okay. It's do you see the slowdown immediately?
Right.
This gives you an idea. So a lot of it is just the raging at things. Like the things are not working. The things are making me expend more energy. Like as an example, like I play a lot of games, like competitively, somewhat competitively, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's healthy for me, even though it's also kind of not healthy, because it's something that I get out a lot of the aggression of like, you know, day-to-day life doing that, because it's like a very much like an arena where you're trying to dominate and you're trying to like impose your will on other people. And then there are all these like little roadblocks along the way of like, this thing didn't go the way that you wanted it to in the game. This thing didn't go the way that you wanted it to in the game. And I see that as like the SE just tripping you while you're trying to get to this singular NiFi goal of like, I want to be at the top of the mountain, but then I'm getting tripped along the way by these random things. Like this character is overpowered. This
feels like it shouldn't go like this. Like things should go your way.
I'm NI seeing the way that it should go in my head, and then I'm being tripped up constantly by this thing that I don't like, this thing that I don't like, which is also kind of FI of like, and also the blast of like controlling the tribe of like, if I had my way, then it would be like this. And then, you know, and then the SE is just very like, it's just this chaotic, for me, it's this thing that I see as very chaotic and like it's controlling me, you know, like the SE is what's controlling me, not the.
What about in terms of like trusting your senses, trusting what you see in front of you?
Oh, terrible, bad, not good.
What does that even mean?
I can't smell anything. Like this is just a very dumb sensory example. Like I can't, if they're cooking food downstairs, I can't smell it from here. I can't, like, I was talking to someone else about this the other day. Like with my vision, like I saw Dave and Shan talking about the, like the eyes of like the different types, how like Shan has like the more colorful eyes that are like looking everywhere. Like even just doing this is like draining for me. Whereas I have the eyes that just kind of like, and Dave has the eyes that just kind of want to look in one direction. And as like an example, when I'm in the car with someone, even if they're the ones driving and I'm just in the passenger seat and they point something out to me, it'll take me a good like 10 seconds to find it, because it feels like if you have like the more SE minded brain and like senses, like you can like take in a wide swath of like visual territory at one time. But for me, it feels like I'm looking like through this and I can only move it a little bit each time to try to look at everything. Like I have to look at this little section, then this little section, then this little section. And maybe on the 15th movement, I'll actually find what they're pointing at, you know?
Right.
And, which is so weird that like,
I'll tell you something. I feel like it's the same for me with SE Savior.
Oh, really?
But I don't get discouraged or frustrated by it.
Oh yeah. Well, I do.
Like,
I'm like,
after enough time, maybe, but I mean, it's like,
no, for me, I'm like,
I will put in the effort.
That's so funny, because it's the exact opposite for me, where I'm like, if they're like annoyed with me for not being able to find the thing that they're pointing at, I'm like, well, whatever. How am I supposed to see it? It's all the way over there. You weren't pointing over there. You were pointing over there. You know, it's like, and it immediately just shoves it off to the other person of like, I shouldn't be responsible for trying to find this stupid thing that doesn't even matter, that I don't even care about, that's just in the middle of a field. Why would I try to find that? You know?
Yeah. You had a really good thing before we started the call about conspiracy theories, and how conspiracy theories are really just an attempt to put responsibility somewhere else than yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to have you blast that again so everyone can hear.
Sure. Just with the same exact wording, of course, because that's just what I do. Yeah, so like I never got big into like the, you know, 9/11 was an inside job, the moon landing was faked. I never got into any of those types of conspiracies. Just because I just never really like bothered to get into them. And I always thought they were kind of silly. But the conspiracies that I do get into, they might have been like a little bit more local, or a little bit more grounded, or maybe more things that were like a part of my actual life. So like the example that I gave before we started was like local government. If I had to get my driver's license renewed or whatever it was, and I would show up, I have to wait in line for them, because of course it's all mismanaged. That's what you'll hear from the conspiracy theorists, is it's all mismanaged.
It's not controlled enough.
It's not controlled enough. Yeah. I have to wait in line for this. Yeah. And I would finally get my ticket called or whatever, and I'd go up to the person and I'd give them all the paperwork that I came with, and be like, oh, you brought the wrong form. You need to have this form instead. And I was like, I was on the website, probably misreading it, because, by the way, just as a sidebar, I had this call scheduled for 3 o'clock my time when it was actually 2 o'clock my time. I checked like 3 times on the the converter, the time zone converter. I checked 3 times, still thought it was at 3 p.m. and it was at 2 p.m.
Right.
I hate time zones. Yeah. Anyways, we're not going to go into that.
But like, I sent you an email saying it was in like 3.25 hours, and that helped a little bit.
Yes, that did help. And I was like,
all right,
that doesn't sound right. And I was like, thank God somebody can double observe the situation and read.
Yeah. Well, there's the daylight savings time that it trips me up too.
Oh, that's what it was.
When we scheduled the call, there was no daylight savings time yet, and then
oh my God, the missing information is here.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
There you go, delivered
by the observer. By the double observer, by the way.
To get back to your point.
Yeah. So I show up. I don't have the right forms, and I'm annoyed. And they say you have to come back. And then I leave. I'm pissed off, and I get in the car. And of course, I don't say anything to their face because feminine, extroverted decider. I'm just like, okay, thanks for your help. And then I walk out the door, and then I rage at them in the car. And it's like, so the only reason why they say that I have the wrong form, even though I checked the website, read it wrong on the website, of course, I guarantee it, is because they want me to have to come back and then I have to wait in line again, and they need more. And because they have people making multiple trips, they quote unquote need more people to staff it so they can keep getting more government dollars, so that they can keep this stupid, shitty organization running longer, and they can keep just because, what was the other? There's a line that I used to use a lot. Because government and bureaucracies just exist for no other reason than to perpetuate their own existence. Like that was a line that I had. That's one of my weirdo.
And so like, I pointed out that's what it is you don't want to take responsibility for bringing the wrong form, so you're blaming them.
Right. Exactly.
And this whole conspiracy is just so that you're not to blame.
Exactly. Well, how could it be my fault? You know, I almost understand the concept of time zones. There's no way that I could be wrong about this.
Right.
Yeah. And oh God, just as
that's like really good. Yeah, that's really good. So like, do you see I'm wondering if that's how other NI see it as well. Like they invent the conspiracies just so they don't feel to blame for things.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, I think with the NI DOMs, it's also just that like for them, reality is scary, you know? Like, I think that's what it is like 9/11 is really scary. Like, because I'm just using that as like an example of like a very widespread conspiracy. Right. I'll give my one little sensory thing, and then you can just apply the concept to everything else, of course. But like 9/11, that's scary. The idea that like just something horrible can happen at any time to any person with no like warning. Just think about it as like, that is the ultimate instance of chaos, is a plane crashes into the building that you're standing near. That's just the ultimate instance of SE chaos in the world. Of course the NI DOMs are going to be freaked out by that, because they're like, they can't see the sensory world, that there are just people.
Right. And so they have to, so you have to sort of, you feel obligated to create a narrative so that it is predictable.
And that there is a control, like
there's the control somewhere.
There's an entity controlling it somewhere. Yeah.
Right.
And in this case, it's the most controlling entity that they see. It's the US government, you know?
Right.
Because none of them know how to pay their taxes, by the way. Thank God for TurboTax. We're all morons. That's basically what it boils down to. So we just can't see reality. And so we invent realities in our own head to cope, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and so it's just a way to explain, say that it's not really chaos. Chaos doesn't exist.
Exactly. Of course it doesn't. How could it? Everything is so controlled all the time. Yeah.
Right. Really cool. I'm wondering about you've gone over everything pretty much. I'm wondering about the masculine FI, and I know Dave talks a lot about his darker periods in history and things like that. And so you're about the age where you would have gone through all that darkness.
Yeah, it was
into your masculine FI.
Right. The worst was
depression.
Probably like age 16 to like age 19 or so. Like that was when it was pretty bad. And like it gets bad still, but it's like, it's not as bad as it used to be. But the problem with it is that and sometimes it's like a great function to have. Like the masculine FI can sometimes be like the best function to possibly have, because it you have something to like always lock onto. I feel like I always feel like I can kind of pull it up and like have something to ground me. But the problem with it is that like, and they've talked about this, is that like the masculine FI, it's the hardest to pull it up. You know, when something goes wrong, it's the hardest for anything else in the outside world to reach in and like help you, because it feels, because it's completely internal. It's introverted. It's locked up inside you, and there's nothing to like anchor you to the. It's also not movable, you know, because it's masculine, and so there's nothing to like link you to the outside world with it. And so I think that's part of why it's such a difficult but sometimes like great function to have. Yeah, but that's basically just the problem, is that it's not movable, which is like, you know, that's kind of like just to talk about concepts. Like that's a concept that I've had to like, it wasn't super hard for me to accept, but that I've had to like process through, is that like things that you have or do are not always good, and they're not always bad, you know, which is like, it's pretty basic, but it's true. It's like, let me just give you a blaster lesson real quick. Like I know anything. But it's you just want it to be easy, right? You just want it to be like, oh, that's a good thing or that's a bad thing. That's a good function or that's a bad function. And it's never that simple. It's just not. And it's just like, sometimes having masculine FI can like anchor you to a world that really is going to shit around you, and you are able to come out the other end mostly unaffected, because you have that thing to latch onto. And then sometimes it's like, things are not so bad around you, but they're terrible inside you, and nobody can reach in and pull you out of it, you know? Right. And especially with the consume last of like, now you're talking, it's really hard for new things to come in into the bubble. And so, yeah, that's a big struggle with it, which so I think.
So you get like really stuck, and no one can help you. Nothing can help you.
Right.
And do you see people give up on you, or do you see?
No, that's the crazy thing, is that like, because it's a savior, I do take responsibility for it. Like I always kind of, not in as many words, maybe, like it was just more of a feeling, but it's like, I knew that it wasn't anyone else's fault that I couldn't get out of whatever I was in. And I knew that they didn't have to do more to help me than they were. Because it's like, I always felt like there were people around me that were willing to help me. It was never that. It was just more like,
you have to get out of it yourself.
Right.
You have to figure it out yourself.
Which is kind of dangerous, but also kind of just like the reality of it, you know? It's kind of both. But yeah, I know like when I've been in like relationships with people, that's a big like problem for my like romantic relationships specifically, is that when I'm like in that darker, like, because I think it kind of comes and goes in seasons, you know, like you might have 3 months where things are going pretty well, and then 3 months where things are not as good, and then it kind of just like ebbs and flows. But when I'm in those darker periods, it's really hard for anyone else to like get in and reach me and like talk to me, and I get very like just grunty of like giving short answer, you know what I mean? And it's just, that's what's difficult about it.
Shout out to Logan and Audrey. They're in a relationship. They're both SE doms with like feminine FI. Both of them have feminine FI, and they were saying like that was the biggest problem in the relationship, is like the FI would just snowball. One would cause the other one, and then cause the other one, and it would just sort of right. And they said if one of them had masculine FI, things would work better, because there would be someone who was sturdy, someone who's not snowballing, someone who would ground them. So I'm wondering if you see that as well in your relationships. And we have a few questions here.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. First of all, like, just to say that, like, I think that, yes, the type is of course important, but that's also something that I've thought about. Like, I think and I briefly talked to Shan about it, and she, like, from like pictures of my last girlfriend and like just like kind of descriptors, she kind of thought that she was an ESFP visual, which would be like the same function stack as Shan's, like, but the feminine SE and feminine FI at the top.
Wow, that should be a pretty good match. In theory, at least. Yeah.
In theory, yeah. I mean, and it was fine. It wasn't bad, but it was like, I think that it's more important about like the people, like the character of the people involved, more so than anything type related. I will say that I do think that having the same function stack regardless of order helps a little bit.
For communication, yeah.
Yeah, for communication, because you're talking past each other less.
Right.
But other than that, and like maybe the opposite sexual charges. So like having a visual if you're audio, or double feminine, double masculine. I don't, this is all like just kind of theoretical and guessing, and like maybe this would help, maybe it wouldn't. I think maybe those types tend to be more attracted to each other just naturally, but whatever. But the thing is that I wasn't really like really in a place where I was like, should necessarily have been with someone else. And I think she was kind of in the same place, just because like we're both still really young and we're both still figuring things out. Yeah, bad timing more than like a mismatch of type. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that like that is just as important as like, but like maybe like if we'd met each other in like our mid to late 20s, maybe things would have been different if we were both a little bit more like settled. And but it was just, I think one of the
still happen, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But like one of the problems was that there was a lot like feminine, masculine, whatever. There was just a lot of FI in that relationship. Like, and it's a great function and all, but like when you get too much of it with two people who have very different like value systems, who both have FI, it's almost like more important for the FI to be on the same page with what it, because like with the recent class they did with that Stefan Speaks guy, the lead, the INFJ, I think he was. They were talking about how like he was like how with the FEs they're just seeing the whole spectrum and like looking at what everyone else values, and they can see it well. Whereas with the FIs, it's like we have to get on the same page instead, like introvertedly, and we might just miss each other and we won't know it for a long time. I think it was kind of like that type of deal where it was like we both had different types of like value systems kind of, and they were kind of missing each other. And we both had the savior FI, so they were both super, they were both super like on the surface. So it was just like there was a lot of conflict that stemmed from our FIs valuing different things, even though hers was feminine, a little bit more movable. It was like, just because we both had like, even though we had the opposite, like FI, like the masculine, the feminine FI.
So was it a lot of like,
matter.
It should be like this, or it should be like this. This is what's right. This is what's right. That sort of thing.
Kind of. It was more of like,
this is more important. That's more important.
Right. Or like, I want you to do this thing so that I feel valued. Like for me, it's like, I hate people giving me presents. I hate like going to parties and stuff. I just like all the standard, like Myers-Briggs introvert things. I'm pretty, which is part of what like me struggling to come to terms with like my introvert versus extrovert energy is that like socially, I am pretty introverted, but like, or at least like when you're talking about like going out and intentionally putting myself in social situations, I'm not the most extroverted person in the world. But like stuff like this, it's like I could do this all day. You know, I could just play blast this all day. I'm guessing you can tell. But you know, it's very different. But it was like, and she, you know, with I think maybe it was like a feminine SE thing or whatever, but like liked the more concrete examples of like showing affection, and like that was what was important to her, whereas I didn't care, and I would just, all I cared about was like spending time with the person or whatever, which is not super standard, you know. Like I think most people like to have something more concrete that they can look at, but because I just disrespect the physical world, I don't care about those things, you know. I don't care about having presence or like physical things, and I thought for a long time that made me more evolved, because I'm like, well, I just don't care about, you know, presence and these trivial things in a relationship. And I was like, as I've like come more out of my own like double introverted world, it's more like, no, like that stuff actually does kind of matter. Like you have to,
it sounds like it doesn't matter versus NF sort of thing.
Right. And it's like, that's just a thing that I've like been trying to work through, is like, first of all, Dick, just because you don't value something doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Like that's an FI thing that you have to.
Everybody decides what matters to them, and to you it doesn't matter, but to her it matters, and so you gotta respect that. Yeah,
exactly. And like, and even things like you know, fashion as an example. Like I'm not into fashion. I don't care about fashion. I wear the same black T-shirt every day, but I'm like, thinking with, you know, feminine and I thinking of the future, it's like, okay, eventually that might be something that I actually have to care about because it does matter, because the way that people perceive you does matter, you know? Like, it's not like you can just let everyone think that you're a weirdo and get away with it. I mean, some people can, like, you know, Elon Musk, kind of a weird guy. He gets away with it.
Do you feel like you judge? Do you feel like you judge things like really quickly, and it's hard for you?
Instantly.
And then it's hard for you to update that
that's
judgment.
Stupid. That's dumb. I don't like that. That doesn't matter. That's stupid. Yes, all the time.
Has anything ever been able to change your mind on stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, sometimes, but like, it's like.
Oh yeah, well, no.
Well, I mean, I'm sure I've changed my mind at some point on something. Like, I changed my mind on people. That's the thing. Is like,
okay,
there's people that I like think that they're a total dick, and then I like get to know them better, and I'm like, oh, I actually kind of like this person. Right. That happens more often than like changing my mind on things. Like with the things, it's more like, nope, I'm done with that. Like games as an example, like because that's kind of like the thing that I do for, especially nowadays with everything going on. That's kind of like my main social outlet right now is playing games with my friends. But if they show me a game that offends my sensibilities of like what makes a good game, I will not play it with them. I don't care if they're all playing it and having fun without me. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to like deal with it. I'm not going to play that game because it's a bad game. It doesn't respect the player. That's one of my go-to lines is like, it doesn't respect your mastery. It doesn't respect like again, with being an energy dominant, I feel like it doesn't respect my time. It doesn't respect my effort, which if I'm giving you my lead sleep, if I'm giving you my effort, then it better be respected according to me in my own brain, which is not anything, you know?
Okay, let's get to some questions really quick. Do you ever feel apathetic?
Oh yeah. Big time. I've been feeling pretty apathetic lately as an example. Like it is a lot of the time very hard for me to get moving. Like even being like high and blast, it can still be hard for me to get moving, which I think is like something that is like, first of all, it gives me more empathy for other people of like, God, if you were blast last, and I feel like this with double activated blast, I can only imagine what it feels like to be blast last with that like level of like difficulty getting moving, you know? So it gives me more like of a window into like other people. But yeah, there's a lot of times where it just feels like the days are just ticking by and it's like, I'm not really doing anything. I'm not moving anything. And it's also like the problem for me is that a lot of time it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, you know, like there is progress being made, but it's not linear, you know? And I think that's life, you know? I think that progress is not linear, but it still feels bad, you know? It still feels bad when you're like, feel like you're going somewhere and then you fall off for a little bit. And then it's like the NI, I like know that I'm going to get back on the path at some point in time.
I'm going to call you out here in a second.
Okay.
Because like you're just totally bullshitting the answer to this question.
Yeah,
it's really well done.
You don't have to call me out. I'll admit it. Of course I'm bullshitting the answer. What do you expect?
Awesome, dude. High five for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were getting somewhere though. It was doing good. Yeah.
Maybe eventually.
Applause.
Thanks.
Sorry.
I almost got away with it.
What's your FTE like?
That one's interesting. Because I like I was saying earlier, it's very available for me to use because it's double activated and it's near the top of the stack. So it's like I have access to it. But the thing that's like kind of weird about it is that I don't necessarily have as much of the tribe human need. You know what I mean? And it's kind of more like a tool that I can sometimes whip out and sort of use than
to like
something that it's then one of my go-tos, you know? Yeah, sorry, what was that?
Is it to like interact with people and figure stuff out with people?
Right. Yeah. And I do have a lot of the
do you feel like it's a pushover a little bit sometimes?
Yeah, definitely. Like, especially if I don't care. Like if my FI hasn't locked on to something, it's like I don't, if there's a different way to do it, I don't care. Like it's a lot of just like throwing ideas out. Like with the guy who I think is like an ISTP that I work with. I feel sometimes, even just with feminine TE, I feel myself overwhelming him. Like we have a bunch of little systems that I was updating, like our file naming. He'd TI figured out his way of like saving all the files, and like it was very good and it worked. And I was like, but we were expanding. So I was like, okay, this needs to be more robust. And then I just started throwing ideas at him, and I could just kind of see the like drain in his eyes, like of all the like TE that I was throwing at him. So it's like, it's kind of like something I can use, but it's not something that it's definitely subservient to the FI. But if the FI doesn't have a dog in a particular fight, then the TE can just go rampant and start like throwing out ideas. Like if like the file naming, I don't care how we name our files. You know, my FI has no commitment to one way or the other. So that's when it becomes like, okay, the best idea should win here because I don't have a particular way that I'm locked onto.
Right. Yeah, that's the apathy there as well. Like that answers the first question too. Okay. It's like if your FI doesn't care.
So you get me to accidentally answer the right question.
Right.
That's how you do it.
All right, we're about to finish off. We have one more question. This is going to be the last one. How do you feel about using your emotions to make a decision? Is that what FI is? It uses emotions to make a decision?
Yeah.
Rather than mental capacity.
It's yes and no. It's like, first of all, because I'm double deciding, I would say that, again, unless the FI is like super locked onto a specific way, I can kind of double decide to make decisions and like use both my thoughts and my feelings. But it feels like more than just it being about, now sometimes it is exactly about emotions and there is no logic and there's nothing else. But what it feels like more to me is like value systems versus like reasons, you know, like the FI, like the masculine FI for me, I have a somewhat, I don't know that I could fully define it, but I know that somewhere in there's this robust system of values that I like have. And so like one of them is like I was talking about earlier with just basically quitting high school and graduating early. One of my values is I will not have like 9 months of my time wasted or whatever, you know, like that's in there somewhere. And so it wasn't like an emotional, like I'm done with this, I'm quitting school. It was more of like and that's why I think why I thought that I was a thinker back then is because it was emotional.
I've asked this before. I'm wondering if your decisions come into play because you have two separate values of yours and one of them has to take priority.
Yeah. And it's also like, whose values are we looking at here? Because of course, if it's FI, it's like especially when you're younger, it's gonna just be your values and you're really not gonna be great at looking at anyone else. It's like, of course you can do it a little bit, but not really. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, the tribe, I can see that the tribe values like finishing out this chapter of your life in a very predictable way. And like all my friends want me to stay and my girlfriend at the time wants me to stay. And it's like, yeah, I can see all that. But at the same time, it's like, where's the authority coming from? It's coming from the FI. It's coming from my own head of like, but I don't value that. So I'm done, you know? Right. I don't know if that makes sense or answers the question.
Yeah. Really good. Cool, man. Well, we'll sign off. Thanks everyone for watching. Do you have anything you want to promote or a final message before we finish?
No, I don't have anything.
Anything about your type that maybe we glossed over that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing that like I feel, even though my type and Dave's type, we're kind of weird and we have our problems. I feel like I'm almost cheating when I consume the op stuff because it's like I'll give you. I haven't used too many egregious metaphors so far, so I'll get my big one out here at the end. I think of it as like, if you're playing sheet music, like on an instrument, it's going to be in a certain key. And if you want, like, say that I play clarinet, I used to play clarinet in high school. So if I play in clarinet and I want to play a piece of music that's intended for a saxophone, I have to then transcribe all the notes to then be playable for clarinet and to have it like sound right. So I have to change keys. It's called transposition. And that's how I see like the op stuff is it's like, me and Dave and Shan are all playing clarinet, but then like you with TI, maybe you're playing saxophone. And so you have to like transcribe the music from from FITE. You then have to transcribe it to TIFE. And I think about like how much easier of a time I have with the op stuff because I don't have to do any of that because I'm literally the same type as Dave. And like, so it's like he talks about something, it's like, I don't have to do any mental math to figure out like exactly what he's saying, because he's saying
He's being spoon-fed to you.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to say, like, especially if you're like an NTP or SFJ out there, I feel for you because I can only imagine how hard it would be.
Well, you have somebody here asking Dallas what your social media is.
You can follow me on Twitter at Michael T. Largent. I don't tweet that often,
Sure.
but that's where it's, yeah.
Send me an exact spelling and then I'll put it